Hello, YouTube. This is Ben Gessel. How's it going? Um, Boy, there's a lot of things still that I need to make videos about. Quite a bit. Um, so, maybe just a few things before I start this topic. I appreciate everybody that's on my channel, of course, and um, subscribed and everything, and all the new subscribers. It's it's always great to see new people subscribing. Um, and again, the focus of my channel is at least, well, it's going to be this way for a long time. Most likely, what will probably happen at this point is, by the way, with my channel, is that I'm going to keep this particular channel always free, or always, what's the word I'm looking for? Not monetized. This one, I don't think it's not going to be monetized. And in the future, some of these videos I might change to private or unlisted. Just all depends. But for the most part, it's going to stay public. At least many of the videos, most of them probably. But this one's not going to be monetized. And if I do more hardcore, like if I get better equipment and more music channel, it's more in line with my major, then I'll probably monetize that. Anyway, so I've been watching a fair bit of YouTube. A lot of things going on with YouTube and certain channels that are going to go to, I'm not sure what the names of the different platforms are off the top of my head, but there are a lot of conservative and alternate news kinds of channels that are heading off of YouTube. You guys can look that up, and I won't get into that too much right now, but it basically coincides with my viewpoint of a lot of things in the world anyway. It kind of confirms a lot of those things anyway. But that's another subject, which what I'm talking about today is going to be bordering on this kind of subject matter a little bit, the conspiracy arenas. But I'm talking specifically about Walt Disney. So I've known some people that don't like him. They don't, for various reasons. But the biggest elephant in the room, well, not the biggest elephant, but one of the big things that people still talk about, which is, in my opinion, utterly ridiculous, has to do with misunderstandings about how people viewed Africans and that sort of thing, that ballpark. Well, not just Africans or African Americans, but anybody with darker skin. Any time, anytime before the Civil Rights era, anytime before 1960s, anytime. If you're talking about people anywhere, like from Asia to the Middle East to Europe, in a lot of cases, American Indians, gosh, before the 1960s, especially in Eurasia, and you think it's just Europe, it's definitely Middle East and Asia as well. Even India. India has kind of had a history of trying to. Anyway, that's another thing. Many times before 1960s, you're going to get some fairly negative things about people with darker skin, no matter who they are. No matter who they are. And people think they're so intelligent, they're still going after not only Disney, but founding fathers and anybody who was an admirable person before 1960s. People think they're so intelligent for going after these people. They're not. People thought differently. People thought differently about people with darker skin before the Civil Rights era. They just did. That was the culture. It didn't matter if you're from Spain or from Japan. It was a different mindset. Now, you always have some countries that might have been a little bit friendlier toward folks with darker skin, be they from Papua New Guinea or Sri Lanka or Mozambique. It doesn't really matter. You always had some cultures and some people here and there that were friendlier. And I would also venture to say American Indians probably had a train of thought that was often pretty friendly as well. But it's just a kind of question of what the details were about that kind of thing. And then you always had individuals, of course, that were much more benevolent toward. So that this all being said, when we're talking about Walt Disney, I don't want anybody getting the wrong idea about Disney. Disney most likely didn't have a special fondness for Africans or people darker skin. However, I don't think he was unkind to anyone. He wasn't purposefully. He didn't try to make life miserable on purpose for anybody. But this is how a lot of people are. They're just kind of in the back of their minds. I don't really care for them so much. But they didn't always articulate those things. Or maybe some of them did, but more so. And we're talking about things in the arts. A lot of folks, in their stories or the movies, they'll try to focus more on certain races, maybe, and as folks that they prefer to think more about or they have a preference for. And that's how everyone is, even nowadays. That's how everyone is. But back before the Civil Rights era, people were just a lot more public about that kind of stuff or about any aversion to certain races. So, but Disney, so people accuse Disney of being a racist. That's not really just Disney. That's also his animators. That's also the culture of America at the time. America was racist before the 1960s. By our standards, they were, but by their standards, they weren't. By their standards, a racist was someone who owned slaves and treated them, whipped them across the back a number of times a day, and hardly gave them any food whatsoever, raped their women, and all this other stuff. Ku Klux Klan, that was racism. In earlier times. And then, so it's all just it's a relativistic kind of thing. It's like, now we always know how when you're treating someone well and you're not. That everyone knows. But we're talking about cultural norms here. Disney was definitely not out of the cultural norm. Not by any stretch of the imagination. He was very much mainstream America. And it's just amazing how many people can't even see that. Especially for somebody so recent in the 1900s. It's so recent, and I can't tell you how many people think that they're so intelligent. People I've known in the past by accusing Disney of being racist, quote unquote. It's like you're accusing most everybody of being racist before the 60s, even if they were great people. It's ridiculous. Now we don't approve of that behavior of. We know that if somebody keeps their own less than amazing thoughts about folks with darker skin to themselves, right? If people keep that stuff to themselves, so what's the problem with that? Well, you don't want to think poorly about someone because of their skin color. You don't even want to think about it. You shouldn't even think about it. But again, this is how a lot of people were. That's how the majority of people were. And nowadays, it's demonized to be even remotely racist. But we also, I mentioned this before, we don't frown on sexual immorality as much. And so in the past, it was mainstream culture to be like, that's wrong. Nowadays, do what you want to do. So our culture keeps changing. And I just, if people cannot understand that, this is the first thing I want to talk about, the very first thing. If people cannot understand that, they're going to continue to have these ridiculous ideas about Disney. Ridiculous. But it's true, Disney did have a love of Northern Europe, Northern Europeans. Does that mean he was racist? No. If you're an Anglophile or you love Nordic folks or German folks or whoever, that doesn't mean you're racist. It's just a question of do you think negatively? And what is the nature of your negative thoughts toward people that you don't care for as much? And then what do you do about those things, especially? And so the question of who's a racist is still a very, it can be a confusing thing. It can be it's a subjective thing. It's ultimately very subjective. So if someone ever calls someone racist, it doesn't mean anything unless someone actually was hurting someone because of their skin color. That's more of the definition of racism, right? Or, and then, it gets really confusing. If someone discriminates against someone because of their skin color based on a job kind of type of thing, that's also racism. But there are some people that may look for racism when there really isn't anything going on there. So so it's also kind of it's someone's eye. It's a perception thing. It's a perception of racism. All right. So versus reality. So So Disney was not racist. That's the first point I want to make. 10 minutes in. Sorry. The second point I want to make is 33rd degree Masons are not Illuminati necessarily. Okay. So there was a gentleman who's a Christian guy. He's actually a really good guy. He actually, I can't remember his name. He put a thing on the internet a while back where he talks in detail about going to Washington, D.C. as a 33rd degree Mason to become a member of the Illuminati, basically. If there's a certain Masonic temple in Washington, D.C. that's for that purpose. And believe me, it's like really, it's fairly hush-hush. So it's amazing that something like this actually was on the internet, not censored. But yeah, he talks about his entire experience in the Masonic Order as being pretty great. It's like a club and kind of thing of, I think, guys. I'm not sure if women are, I don't know. It's kind of a guy thing. But so he's picked and he's like, oh my gosh, I get to go to this elite kind of subgroup or this elite of the elites of the 33rd degree stuff, right? This is way back in, I don't know how long ago. Is this maybe 70s? I don't know. Maybe 80s. But so he talks about how there's this sacrament that he is involved in where they drink out of skulls, and it's really dark. It's really, really evil. It's so evil that, I mean, I can't remember exactly if he goes through it or not, but I remember, in his experiences, he talks about how the guys interviewing him to be part of this group, they don't value his Christianity, or they think they say, it's like brushed off, or it's considered not something that they value again. And ideally, he should be like a Luciferian, really. And so he's kind of shocked at all this. This was an experience that he'd been looking forward to all his life. And what happened, instead of having this amazing experience, it was hellish. It was evil. It was Luciferian. It was demonic. So that's this guy's experience. He was a pretty cool guy, like I say. Crazy experience. I don't think he became part of the group. I think he left. And so the question then is, was Walt Disney one of these guys? Obviously not. Obviously not. Whatever he had done up to that point to being a 33rd degree guy was fine. But when it's a question of if you're picked, you have to be picked. You have to be tapped, right? Of this 33rd degree group, you have to be picked, to become part of this other group. You don't. It's not like you don't really. No, they choose you. You don't choose them, and that's always how it is. And so Disney had some restaurant at Disneyland that's, Cafe 33, and so all this Masonic stuff. That doesn't mean hardly anything. Disney was not involved in anything nefarious regarding the Illuminati. He just wasn't. Now, he may have been kind of on their radar. He may have tried to be friends with everybody who is a pretty third beyond him in the Masonic order. That is understandable, but he wasn't in the in. He was not in the in club. I'll put it that way. He was not in the club. He didn't know about all the bad things they wanted to do. 2 people of African descent, by the way. He had no idea about any of that stuff. Or if he did, he had very little knowledge of it, and he tried probably not to think on it too much. But he was a big media guy. And so again, I know he was, in a sense, in the club, as George Carlin puts it. But no, he wasn't. He was not a he was not a drinker of babies' bloods and that sort of thing. And nothing like that. Not at all. So that's the second thing I want to say. So Disney, in addition to not being racist, Disney was not a member of the Illuminati. Okay. The third thing I want to mention is regarding the movies and all the programming kind of thing. MK Ultra programming that you hear about sometimes. And I realize I'm talking increasingly about conspiracy stuff. Started out with, civil rights era, racism, that sort of thing. Now I'm getting a bit more conspiracy stuff, including this stuff. So a lot of people will notice that once Eisner started taking over things, You have a lot more sexual innuendo, sexual innuendo in Disney. It's true. Eisner was not as godly of a man as Disney was. He didn't have the same principles, not the same morals. Disney himself had certain ideas that were, we'll just say, very old-fashioned, and so, there's the whole feminist thing. I understand. But they can't even have beards. You couldn't even have beards if you were working there, and only guys could be the animators and all this stuff. I know it's very old fashioned by our standards. So, but getting back to this, what's in the movies, what's in the look, Disney didn't have any sex in his stuff. No sex. Nothing inappropriate. Did he have any Illuminati programming in the movies that he was in charge of? No. I'll just say that. None. Nothing. Zilch. Nada. Nothing. Nothing. His movies were about going out camping with your dad. Like Follow Me Boys. It was about Boy Scouts. Or it was about, princesses and princes and kings in Europe and elsewhere a little bit. But more Europe, I guess. But it's just basically fairy tales plus Mickey Mouse and stuff, plus your great outdoors and sciencey kinds of things, and the Shaggy Dog, and the Love Bug, and this stuff. There's nothing. In fact, if there are any movies that are 100% not having anything to do with mind programming, it's definitely Disney movies are great. They're amazing. They're awesome. The old stuff, mind you. Once Eisner took over, you have this gradual increase in, I believe, Illuminati programming, which gets away from this belief in the nuclear family being a good thing, and husband and wife, and kids obey their parents as their parents do what's right, and Christianity, but all other religions that are respectable. I mean, old Disney reinforced good traditional values. New Disney, less and less so. Talking back to your parents, for one thing. Anyway, it just has gotten more further and further away from what Disney once was. This is no mystery. There's nothing new about what I'm saying here. What I'm trying to say is there was never anything Illuminati related in the old Disney to begin with. Nothing. Now you look at, I don't know. You can talk about symbols and things like the 666 that's in the Walt Disney. I don't know how long it's been there, or whatever. But I know that if there's anything in that regard regarding symbols, it's become more apparent in more recent times. It's the best way of putting it, I suppose. Now, maybe Disney might have been under pressure to have certain Illuminati symbols in his stuff. Maybe there were certain deals that we don't know of that went on between Disney and the Illuminati. But all that they amounted to were just symbols, in my opinion. There was nothing regarding content, the actual content of his movies, that would cause someone subconsciously to accept the Illuminati without question, as in Illuminati rule. And let's be clear about what Illuminati rule is, in my opinion. Illuminati rule is definitely the most important thing about it. The main thing about it is not a belief in God. It is actually anti-theism, or especially the more we're talking about how God really is, his righteous character, his perfect character, his loving character. It is the polar opposite of that. Belief in Illuminati is a belief in anything that's not, helpful to your spirit, or to, even if you're not Christian, it's anything that you're doing in your life that is bringing you joy. Illuminati doesn't want you to feel that way. Illuminati wants you just to, it's 100% secular, but it's the worst kind of secular. You're all going to be our zombies, our drones. We're gonna suck the life right out of you. That's what they're about. Anything to that end, to cheapen everything that should be held sacred, the Illuminati's after. So they're definitely after sexual immorality. They're definitely after materialism. It's the extreme. They're definitely after anything that keeps you away from being happy. That's what they're after. Um, so it's easy to pigeonhole them, but no, that's basically it's another word for evil. It's another word for Satan. What they're after. And so, in wrapping this video up, um, when I hear this crowd about Disney, I just want to say you guys need to figure a few things out first, because most of America before the civil rights era was racist on in your way of thinking on some level, and then Disney had nothing to do with the Illuminati and what they were after. He was just trying to stay afloat in his business, and you know, yeah. So anyway, I realize this video can be a little bit controversial depending on how you feel about Disney, but I want to at least mention these things because this is one man that I truly respect. I mean, you have to keep in mind again that most of the founding fathers were not exactly the biggest fans of Africans as well, or at least the majority of them, more than half. But they still treated them well, and some of the founding fathers were especially considerate and, we'll just say, fair-minded toward African Americans or Africans. But believe me, during the Continental Congress, you had to deal with the South, and they still, treated Africans like slaves. So there's all that discussion going on. You can talk about Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings and all that stuff. I get it. I understand, but you cannot deny the fact that men like Washington and Jefferson and John Adams were very godly, good men. But you have to keep in mind again when people were alive, what the culture was like. And any history teacher will know this stuff if they're worth their salt. Okay, so anyway, leave your thoughts and comments below. I'll catch you guys later. Take care. Bye.